Hello and welcome to our first ever online class. I'd like to say hello to everybody who has done classes with us before and a big welcome to those people who haven't. For those people who haven't met before, I'm Andy, and this course will be looking at the basics of drawing. We're going to stick with readily available materials such as a pen, pencil, felt tips. We'll be doing 4 sessions. There'll be 2 this week and there'll be 2 next week. In each session there'll be an introductory activity and something that's more advanced. I'll also be throwing in some activities for all the family. Then at the end of the course I'll be asking you to send 1 or 2 images so I can make a slideshow of what everyone has done. Okay, so ready for the first session. Today we're going to be looking at continuous line. That's where you draw with a pen or pencil and it never leaves the paper. It's a really good way of trying to get your hand and your eye coordinated together. What you'll find is that it's a little difficult at first because your eye naturally jumps around all over the place. That's how it builds up an image of the world around us. That's fine for every day, but when you're drawing, you really want to control your eye and look carefully. So it's a great exercise if you're just trying to get to know and understand an object. It also creates loose flowing images and it can be really relaxing and fun. So this is an example of continuous line drawing, a couple of examples. So the top one's very simple. The other one you can see is a little bit more complex. The person's gone back over and over the lines, so it's much more busy and so on. And here's one from a student from the last time we ran this course. I thought it was really lovely actually. Some very nice detail there, concentrating on the detail in particular, different types of shapes and so on. So we'll start with something simple like that, and then we're going to move on to something a bit more complicated for people who are more confident. This is an example looking at a cityscape. And what I hope you'll notice is, in general, it looks quite realistic, but actually, when you look more closely, everything's a little bit wonky, a little bit uneven. You know, it's not very carefully measured, but it doesn't matter. It still all works as a whole. And finally, we're going to do a fun activity where we use multiple coloured lines to create an image. So here are a couple of examples. And here are some which have been wet and then worked back over. So I hope that sounds like lots of fun. I really enjoy this method of drawing, and I'll show you later on some examples of my work using this technique. But right now, let's get on with exercise 1. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate this technique. And ideally you spend about 10 minutes doing this drawing. So I'm going to get started and then we will cut off the video because we don't know how to speed it up yet, and then we'll show you the end results. So I'm using just an ordinary pen and I'm going to be drawing from this piece of rope, and I look for an area that I find interesting. It doesn't matter where it is, that's up to me, and then I start to draw. And I'm trying to make my hand move slowly around the my eye move slowly around the object. Looking down only very occasionally, trying to draw what I see and to not jump about. With this technique, it's a great warm-up, so I'd encourage you not to really worry about the end result. It doesn't matter if it's a bit wobbly and wonky and so on. Actually, this texture is really interesting, so I'm just spending a little bit longer just sort of drawing detail. It doesn't matter if you don't draw the whole object. Just relax into the drawing, get fascinated by looking at the object. If something takes your interest, spend time looking at it and exploring it with your eye and the pen. Don't worry about the overall picture. That will take care of itself. Just really enjoy looking at that object and drawing it. I'm going to continue this drawing for about 10 minutes. 10 minutes is a good time, but we're going to stop filming now and then cut to the results. Welcome back. So here is my finished continuous line, and as you can see, I've just started to work back into it a little bit with colour, because there's this lovely blue bits on this bit of rope. Something I should say is that it doesn't matter if you do take your pen off the paper occasionally. So to get from here to finish off over here, I had to stop and start again. That's just part and parcel of the drawing. The most important thing is to try to keep your hand and your eye working together. I'd recommend starting with something quite simple, and then you can progress on to something more complicated if you want to. But once you've got that drawing, you can do all kinds of things to it. You can work back into it, for example, to add shadow, like I'm doing here. You could paint over the top of it to add a little bit more colour. If you've got fine liner pens, it's worth just checking to see if they're waterproof or not, because if they aren't, this is fine liner at the top, then using a small brush you can sort of nudge the ink around a little bit, which makes really quite nice results. What I would just say about fine liners is cheaper the better. The more expensive ones tend to be waterproof. What you want if you're getting fine liners is cheap ones, because they tend to run, as do cheap felt tips. Anyway, we are now going to move on to exercise 2. But before we do that, I'm going to show a few more images of this first exercise that students have done while I'm getting ready. Welcome back. So now for a more advanced exercise, we're going to look at drawing something more complex like a cityscape. You might choose to do something different, but something which has a lot of detail. And the key thing about this is to concentrate on the detail and let the whole image take care of itself. You'll be amazed what the eye does. If you put enough detail in, it tricks the eye into filling in everything else. It will straighten out all the wonky bits and so on. We'll also look at adding a little bit of a wash in there as well. So here is an example from a previous class, but I'm going to do a different picture. I'm going to do the one I'm just placing here. I'm going to base it on that one, and I'm going to work with just an ordinary pen again. You could work with a coloured pen if you prefer. And the dome is the most striking thing, so that's where I'm going to start. And again, with this demonstration, I'm going to begin using a continuous line, trying to look at all those details. That dome is really very interesting. The line coming across, sort of ridges going up. And just focusing on all these interesting details. And scribble a bit harder where there's some shadow. Those spikes. Some details interest me more than others, so I'm not doing every single little bit. And now this dome, great big dome. And straight away I can see that I've not done it quite wide enough on that side, so I'm going to add another line in and then start to put these ridges back in. What was that I just missed there? It's an interesting detail. I'm going to go back and put that in. I can't get every single line there. Well, maybe I could if I was more patient. Okay, so I've been working on this for about 15 minutes. You could carry on for longer. You might spend a whole hour just drawing all those details. I got the picture from a magazine, and as I was drawing it, I started to realize, hang on a minute, is this Venice? And I think it is. It looks like it might be. But what was very interesting about the drawing was all the things I started to notice, like just here, this spiral shape on the side of the building, the clock on that building there, the little figures on top of the buildings, which I hadn't really noticed before. So it really is a good way to get your eye really looking. Now you can leave a drawing just like that, or you can add colour into it. Here's one that I've done previously. Similar technique, a little bit of extra detail has been put in without using continuous line, but I've used watercolour quite strongly to colour the image. If you haven't got paint at home but you've got a brush, then you could make your own paint. Today I'm going to use coffee. So I've mixed some coffee up quite strong with water, and I'm going to use this to start to add some colour in there. Just sort of, not everywhere, just sort of working it in to create a little bit more contrast within the picture. Just sort of working across, trying to look for those slightly darker bits, adding a little bit of shadow into them. Put the shadow on the wrong side of that dome, but never mind. And what I quite like to do is tip it a little bit so the colour starts to run and gather downwards. You see that gathering just there? Is that in camera okay, Jill?
Yes, it's fine.
Thank you. I should have said earlier, Jill's on the camera today.
Hello.
She'll be running another course later this week in collage.
Yes.
So just letting it run and gather a little bit so it creates a bit more of a sort of mood. And what I can do is just add water to help that run down a little bit more. Can you see it running? So it sort of washes down. If you do this with water soluble fine liner pens, then you'll find that the lines will dissolve too. But I've just done it with an ordinary pen today. Have a bit more of that in there, a little darken again, and I'm going to get a hairdryer to dry it. So we'll just pause a minute. I'm going to dry it and I'm going to build some more layers. So I've added 2 layers of my colour so far, drying in between so that the colour builds up and you get these different tones. Basically we're glazing with coffee, and I'm going to keep doing that until I create a really nice sort of tonal picture. If you've got paints, acrylic paints, you can just add water to them to do this. Poster paints, any kind of paint, even household paints. Or you can make your own colours with different sorts of things. Some things are more stable than others. Okay, so there is my finished picture. Now I'm going to show a quick slideshow of examples of past students doing similar sort of pictures, and then we're going to move on to exercise 3. The last exercise is hopefully something that you can have a bit of fun with all the family. We are going to again use the continuous line method, but use 3 pens at once. So I've got 3 felt tips, a darkish blue, a lighter blue and a pink, and I'm going to draw with them all at once. These are examples that students have done in the past, and then we can wet it, dry it and work back in. And most felt tips you'll find run in really quite interesting ways. I have to say that students are always much better at this than me. I'm not quite sure why. We can't be good at everything. But here goes. Let's see. I'm going back to my piece of rope because I like it, but you could pick whatever you fancy. You could even take pictures of faces out of magazines and try doing that. They could be really quite fun. So again, I've got this rope coming around. And actually crazy at the end, isn't it? There. And these sort of knotty bits in the middle. Okay, that's step 1. As I say, most felt tips will actually run, so I'm going to start to add a little bit of water. Maybe, whoops, that was maybe just a bit too much there. You can see how it's running. Maybe use a slightly smaller brush now, and just adding a little bit of water to get that to move and run a bit. And to think where I'm putting it, so I'm just putting it everywhere. Actually, I quite like that really wet bit there. I'm going to make it even wetter. Why not? Not really wet there, but not so wet elsewhere. Jill's passing me a piece of paper towel. I think she thinks I'm going to spill something in a minute. I'm going to quickly dry it. You can watch this. Whey! My pictures are flying everywhere. Letting it blow around as I dry it. That's quite interesting. Go on. I just dab that little bit with a paper towel, finish it off. This is another picture flown off the table. And now, again, I can draw back in. Starting to draw back in again, making the picture a little bit more definite, but trying to work with those lovely colours and runniness. I'm not exactly using a continuous line now, I virtually am. I'm scribbling in a bit of shadow in there. Oh, a little bit too wet still there. This lovely knot. And this is a much looser, quicker, more playful sort of drawing. I might even add a bit more of some of that colour back in there. A bit of that pink back in there again. A bit more black. And to keep my hair out of the picture. And now we're going to cut to a slideshow of examples that students have done. And there's my final picture. I could work back in more if I wanted to, but I quite like it just scribbly like that. I hope you enjoyed our first class. Tomorrow I'll be looking at how to draw objects by breaking them down into simpler shapes. I'm going to be starting with shells. If you've got shells, you might want to do something similar. To make it easier for you, I will be laying a photograph of the shell down so that you can see exactly what I'm looking at. Have fun, and if you do Facebook, you can share the work that you've done today on the Art for All page. Details coming up. Bye bye.